Hey everybody, and welcome to another Destiny movie night hangout. I'm your host here, Mike, and I'm here with Carrie. Hey Carrie. And so for those of you watching today, we are looking at the movie The Shining, a real psychological thriller from 1970s, I think it was. Sounds about right. So I'll give a quick overview here of the movie. So, like I said, a psychological thriller starring Jack Nicholas. Kind of interesting. It takes place at this famous hotel, like real, like elitist, exclusive up in the mountains in Colorado. It's like a seasonal resort type hotel that's only open for about 6 months, like the spring, summer 6 months because the maintenance, the roads to get out there in the winter are just deemed to be too much of a hassle to maintain. So we see early on Jack Nicholas, who's a writer, is applying for the job to be the caretaker for the hotel and basically the off season because nobody's there basically, but they need somebody to do repairs if repairs need being done. And we get the like impression that this is not like an often sought after job because there's extreme isolation with the position, and we see kind of right from the beginning like Jack's character is kind of interesting in that he's like, oh no, this is perfect, this is exactly what I need, is just to be by myself, like you don't have to worry about me going crazy, da 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 da. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And they kind of like warn him that there's been like some mishaps in the past, basically, where the caretaker went crazy and killed his family. And he's kind of not bothered by this at all, kind of laughs it off. And so his family is basically has a young boy who's maybe 5 years old or so, kind of thing, and a young wife. His wife looks to be a bit younger than him, whatnot. And so it's just the three of them that are going to be up there. They go. The boy, he basically is showed to have some sort of like psychic phenomena type skills, like ESP is referred to, like sort of like a remote viewing where he can see like bits and pieces in the future or like flashes from the past of things that normal people can't see. And they're getting the rundown of this hotel. It's like super magnificent. And in meeting a few of the staff, they're just leaving. They meet the cook, who says hi to the boy, the child, who's like referred to as Doc as his nickname. And he calls the boy his nickname without having met him before, and the mom finds this quite peculiar. And thinking like, you've never met us before, like how did you know to call him Doc or whatnot? And he's just like, oh, he must have said it or something like that, but he didn't. And then next thing you know, the chef and the boy are alone, and the mom's being like given a tour by someone else, and he's just being given some ice cream, and he tells them that he's got this special gift, and it's referred to as like the shining, that he can see the shine on things, people that others aren't able to see. And yeah, basically we're being given a bit of insight about the boy's ability, and that the chef cook also has these abilities, and that there's like some things about the hotel that are a bit spooky, if you will. And yeah, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, yada yada yada, a whole bunch of crazy stuff happens, where basically Jack the father goes psycho, or while it's questionable that he's been psycho kind of the whole time, but we don't know the extent to which he's operating like in the depths of his own mind. and just kind of like going deep into his own like rabbit hole of thought. And it really plays out like in the whole isolation point, like that he's acting out his anger towards his wife. And he's like super obsessed about his writing, which we later find to see it was kind of like erratic, like he was writing over and over again the same things all the time. Like, what was he saying? Like, all work and no play make Jack a dull boy. Um, something like going crazy, basically. And it was like thousands of pages of this just like seen over and over, and the wife finds this, and the next thing you know he's there, and just like a lot of intensity. And I won't get into all the details of it, but basically, the family's alone in the hotel, they're kind of on the run, it's remote. The chef starts to see that something's up, he's trying to get out there, and it's a whole basically thrill, like, and is some bad stuff going to happen? And well, ultimately Jack ends up dying. And I won't go into all the details there, but yeah, like psychological thriller and into basically bad stuff playing out. And along the way we see some hallucinations within Jack, where he's having these conversations where you think it's like totally real, and it kind of gives insight into like our own mind, how basically if we feed characters or like personas within our own mind, we can really make sense and believe to see things that aren't really here. Like kind of gives insight into like a mental condition, into like one having a form of psychosis, if you will. And yeah, so initially, I just like to add in, before having like watched this movie, I didn't really know anything about it other than it was by Stanley Kubrick, the director, who also did the movie. Well, he's done a bunch of movies. One that was familiar to me was Eyes Wide Shut, and I found that to be quite interesting because it was like, inside the world of the elite also, and kind of like Illuminati type ritual type behind the scenes type things. And so I was just curious to where this was going to go. And initially I was kind of like, why did he make such a like psychological thriller? Like, and it really kind of challenged my programming almost, in terms of like what I'm looking for in a movie sometimes, or almost wanting that, feel good story, which so many movies are about, is that, even if there's problems or dramas, by the end of it, it's kind of like all is good, the day is saved kind of thing. And this didn't give you that whatsoever. In fact, it totally just built up all the way to the end, which it really gave me insight into just the whole, again, like the process that we're working with and investigating our own minds, how how there's just such responsibility for our communication, and to really be self-honest about what's going on with us, so that we don't like operate as just this compounding consequence that isn't really directing the reality, but basically is just imploding to such an extent. Carrie, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I totally agree. This was an in-your-face look at what happens when you allow things to accumulate. And it's funny because I've had a lot of things going on in my life that it's been, really emotional, lots of anger, and that powerlessness of not being able to control what is happening. And before all this happened, people would come to me and talk to me and say, how like they would have like these murderous imaginations, and I couldn't relate whatsoever. And it seemed like a common thing, but to me, it looked separate from me. So when I got to a point in my life where everything was going to shit, and I had no control, and it was so emotional, and I was taking everything personal, and it was just building and building and building. One day, I just looked at this person that I saw was the cause of it all. And I could see myself making them bleed, like over them with a knife, just stabbing and stabbing and stabbing. And I was just shocked that that existed in me. And to me, it was like, okay, this, this is going to make it better. This is going to make me feel good, to make them, feel the pain that I'm feeling that they've caused me. And it was like this rage. And fortunately, I noticed it, and I immediately got pen, paper, and just started writing it out, so because I knew that, when things like that accumulate in you and you have that feeling as though if I act on this, I'm going to feel better.
Right.
That if you allow that you could potentially end up hurting someone. And so, as I said, I wrote it out. I self-forgave it. I got support from my friends. So it is a real possibility, the things in this movie happening. It's happening.
For sure. And I
All
mean,
that, yeah.
or go ahead.
Just allowing all of that anger to accumulate and not looking at what's the cause of this? Why am I so angry? And I mean, a part of it is, part of anger is seeing other people do things that you've told yourself, well, I can't do, but they're doing it. And that's a part of anger. And then there's another part that came out recently when I was talking with a friend, and that is that point of powerlessness. Like someone has the power and you have none. So in what I see in the movie is he's in isolation. He has no control over his environment whatsoever. And it triggers that anger and that rage that he's been accumulating all that time.
It's interesting with the point of like isolation, because in not having that clear communication with others in your reality, you don't have those like the same check yourself points, basically, where your reactions are exposed on a grander scale, because if your communications are so limited with a few people or whatnot, you might not realize the extent to which you're operating within your own cycle, if you will, like that state. And yeah, that's like an interesting thing, because like I've experienced that within myself, where I would basically push myself almost like into a point of isolation at different times, where I didn't want to be like around like a lot of people. I just wanted to be by myself, just chill. And it's kind of like within those points where it's basically like you're just alone with your own thinking. It's not to say that some solitude with yourself, some solitary time is okay, but I think it's definitely important to have a balance with that. Just as some mere reflections, because I mean there is a lot of us here in this world to basically be all by yourself all the time. You can basically make sense of nonsense within yourself, because you're not having those mirrored reflections as the outflows of your environment. And at the same time, the movie showcases like an extreme example of like the emotional play or whatnot. But I was like looking at myself, for instance, how it can be done also in a lot more subtle ways where you take on, let's say, different character roles as outlets for the emotion that's going on within you, as sort of like a survival and coping mechanism here in this world. Because, you know, if you look at it, essentially, like with this whole survivor mentality construction of the way the world is designed and how we're all operating here together, it's, you know, it's very much like a dog eat dog world, and everybody's like operating within a different character given a different situation based on, you know, to a certain extent, the like emotional status that they're experiencing within whatever situation they come into. So it's kind of like go into this, you know, safety mode as, okay, I'm gonna just like play this role as this character, and it's kind of like, you know, being in like an autopilot, but at the same time being rushed within your, you know, your actions you're sharing, and, you know, not necessarily being all the wiser that you're operating like in this state that's perpetuated by your own fears, essentially. Or, you know, when I say fears, like that encompasses like a whole spectrum of emotion. It could be in a positive realm or a negative realm, and, you know, there's a whole array of different words that fit that description. But the starting point kicker is that, you know, you're not totally at ease within yourself, and you're like looking to basically get that release so that you can be at ease, and going into the character is kind of like the outlet for the energy buildup that's existing within yourself. A point for myself that I was just reflecting on, and realizing that I developed at a very early age, was where I would go into like a sort of like funny like character as a defense mechanism within myself. And it first, like I first developed this when I was a young child, um, because, you know, one day it was like I was like four, maybe just turned 5 years old. I think I was four, and I was on the schoolyard, and some older kids just started making fun of me, and, you know, that hurt my feelings. That didn't feel good. All this stuff, like, you know, went into extensive like inferiority, just, you know, all this, and I didn't even have the vocabulary or the understanding really that I could verbalize anyways, of, you know, just how I didn't like this and why was this happening to me, kind of thing. Um, anyways, I told my parents about it like after school that day, and they told me, you know, sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt you. So kind of the next day, you know, basically the same play out was going to happen, because, you know, the first day, like I reacted and was basically feeding what, you know, the bullies or whatever were looking for to get out of me. Um, and so the next day, like having this, what I, you know, saw as the sort of like answer, the comeback, if you will, it was kind of like, no, you can't bring me down today. It was like, don't you know, sticks and stones, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it was kind of like I laughed it off. And what I really ended up doing was kind of like basically just pushing back the energy, and kind of like bullying back the bullies, kind of thing, with my words, and like laughing it off, making a joke of it. But it really being rooted in not understanding, you know, how to communicate effectively, like the point, or talk to the other like as an equal. It was very much, you know, in conflict. And I could see how as I got older, like that became like a point that I would go into as a way basically to get an outlet, a release of the like emotional disdain that was going on within myself. Yeah, like those discomforts. And it was kind of like, holy wow, because, you know, that point goes back so far, and I totally didn't even see it. And at the same time, it's kind of like, the more you develop like serious relationships with people, people kind of like support the self definition of your character or how they can characterize you. And so that for me, I could see how that sort of substantiated me, playing into this role at different times, is like creating that as my self image. That's who I am, kind of thing. And so it's like, over time buying into it the more and more so, and kind of being like, wow, like, holy shit, what the fuck. um because yeah, it really wasn't like a totally like at ease point. And I could relate to the like anger emotion that you bring up there, because basically what I could see is, I was accepting and allowing a point of inferiority within myself so extensively, and I would like act it out in a manner where like I would appear superior in my expression, and maybe even go into a bully role sometimes with that joking, where it'd be like poking fun of another kind of thing. And yeah, just perpetuating like, my own mental dissonance at times. And yeah, so that's like an example of how it can be just so subtle. And really the solution for, in seeing like a pattern or a point within yourself, I found, is to, like identify where you see it having started. Be specific about looking at like the moment there's like that movement within yourself where you're basically going into like access this particular like character, and acting out like a role, basically like the reaction point. And then be specific about what is the experience you get out of it, because in identifying like these key points about it, you can see where those words are existing in you as a form of suppression from your really like your utmost potential. And then, from there you can resubstantiate the living expression of yourself, and not, have to be like in an inner turmoil, inner conflict with yourself in order to just exist and express yourself, willfully from moment to moment, and be at ease within your being here, which, to me revealed just kind of like a point of like, wow, like how much stress I've like allowed, seemingly almost unconsciously, as like a method I developed for, coping with living in this world.
Yeah, I can completely relate. We discussed this in one of the last hangouts. We did the Zoolander hangout, where we're just basically put down here, and there's no instructions on how to actually cope with what's going on here and all the conflict, and trying to find your way within it all, and to be okay with yourself. And for me, yeah, it was about kind of like the same age as when I started to be, bullied, and taking things that other kids did really personally. And I struggled with it for a long time, probably until I was like in first grade. Um, it was very frustrating because I just couldn't understand, why I couldn't fit in. And one day we were out playing at school. We were playing kickball. And that is when I found I was really good at sports. Um, I mean, I was really good at this game. And that's when people stopped harassing me, because I could, win. I could get our team to win. Everybody wanted me on their team. I was all of a sudden popular. Um, and so from then on out, it was just maintaining that cool kid character at any cost. Always finding like the one friend that was the most popular and getting with them. Because if you got close with the popular kid, you were safe. So I mean, that's just a pattern that I continued throughout my life. You know, staying with the sports, hanging out with the cool kids. It was just a safe place, and yeah, I don't even know where I'm going with that, but that's my, you know, whole background there, from just not being able to cope and just finding that one character, that one personality that can carry me through. Where it was just, you know, the whole sports things was just one expression of me, but I just limited myself in that box and just used characters to get through life.
Well, it sheds a lot of insight just into the nature of our communication with each other, just as a species, like the human race, for instance, just how extensive our ability or inability is. Well, both, basically, our willingness to communicate with others. Where it's basically like, well, if this is in line and if this is in line, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But like, you're sharing example, I can totally relate to that as well. I've talked to others who've said the same thing, where you're not even interested in giving somebody like the time of day if they don't align with being of this type of character or this type of character, because in our mind we've dismissed the value, essentially, like the worth of the individual beingness of each other here, to such an extent of like, well, like in my mind, I'm in conflict with that character. But I would say that that's not even really like a conscious point so much. It's more of like a conscious reactionary play out, as like the point is just so deeply embedded, rooted in deep, where it's quite fascinating that exists so extensively, so because I mean, it really shows how much we're missing out on each other here, and the amount that we're able to learn from one another here, and really the enjoyment factor. Because, well, I've mentioned this before in Hangouts, but it's a very commonly regarded point of fear, is that the biggest fear of people collectively is talking to people they don't know, like talking in front of like an audience, for instance. And that, to me, it really reflects the point of, the whole spectrum of characters being in the audience. So it's not just your, individual, like specifically picked friends that mesh and support you, like existing in a character role, and you support them in a character role. So it's kind of like everybody remains, like a mind consciousness system, if you will, and just kind of like acts out the energy, throws the energy at each other in different ways. Like each other creates the outlets, and we just like say, well, that's who they are. Like they're always going to be like that, and we basically like accept and embrace each other's limitations, as opposed to really pushing each other to be, the best version of ourselves. Because it's kind of like, if you step out of character and start changing like the way of your personality, and in the way that you've always kind of coped within living with your reality, that's going to be extremely challenging, and like there's going to be a lot of resistance come through in your friends and family, for instance, because they're used to like knowing you to basically be programmed to operate always in a certain way, so like very predictable in your behavior, your manners, and so that they feel there's a sense of like safeness, because you're not going to be like challenged or engaged on like your suppressions, your fears, those points that are like uncomfortable within yourself. And like I noticed, as I started really challenging myself and questioning the different acceptances and allowances, I encountered more and more resistance in my reality, to an extent, because it makes for awkward moments, if you will, uncomfortable moments, by like asking like serious or like deep questions. That can be scary, whatnot, because maybe the person you're asking isn't up for that, isn't down for that, and that's like maybe that hasn't been like your typical behavior. That's not why you got along with that person initially in the first place. It was maybe, for instance, because you both like hockey or whatever, this activity, and your whole friendship is rooted around this and maybe like a few other shared things. But if you start like expanding it, opening it up, or start, opening up new circles to you, it kind of brings in those, circles of people into conflict with the others of like, oh no, like you're hanging out with so-and-so. I don't want to go there because, they're interested into this and that doesn't interest me. And we kind of like keep ourselves within, our realm of self-interest. And just the whole perspective thought of, question, what is self-interest? That, has been like a biggie, even a challenge for me, to even consider that, the scope of the problems we face in this world are so much so because of our self-interest. And, what does that really mean? I mean, initially, I couldn't even look at such a point, or I was afraid to, because it would basically mean like, if I'm to acknowledge or say like, yeah, self-interest is the problem here, I got to accept myself as part of the problem in this world. And I basically conditioned myself to see myself as just good, inherently good, like all good, that there's other bad people doing bad things, but that's so far removed from me and my reality that I'm kind of all good, which even that kind of thinking showcases that self-righteous character in playing into the ego of superiority. And to what extent, like, that's always a point of question, but it just showcases how on even like a subtle level, and just regarding yourself as having not acted out such, let's say, evil acts as others you regard, you'll then dismiss them and basically abdicate your ability to reflect and take responsibility for the status of the world, because essentially you fear your world ending as like how you've defined it. That was kind of a biggie for me, in being like, well, if I don't have my self-interest, like I'm not going to know how to exist here in this world, because my self-interests to such an extent have become, manifestations of like my emotional outlets, of like how I, get a release from the buildup of the suppressions within myself.
Yeah. What
Carrie,
keeps coming up from, yeah.
or I was just going to say, just before you go, I just wanted to let everybody know that we have the question and answer comment app open today. And so you're welcome to share if you'd like to. And Carrie, just before you go, I'm going to we had one come in here. I just want to read to it before I forget. Hello, thanks for discussion. Would you say, guys, that this shines towards people is because of points that you are hiding something behind you, that you're really not grounded within yourself, and that's why you're shy? Thank you, and cheers. So the point they're questioning here is basically about shyness. You want to answer that, Carrie?
Well, shyness isn't a positive attribute in the world. Shyness will make you sometimes a victim to people who aren't shy. So when it's perceived that that is a bad thing, I know for me, honestly, when something comes up about me that I see as bad or I perceive as bad, I'm going to, or I have attempted to separate myself from it. And I will completely go to the opposite pendulum extreme. That shyness comes up. Well, this isn't good. I can't be this. So then I will bury it and work on not becoming shy, just going right to the opposite extreme, becoming extremely extroverted. Never finding that balance, and it's complete separation from shyness and not looking at the word shy. What is shy? How can I bring this word back to me and make it a part of myself and see myself in it and see it externally as well, rather than seeing it as something bad or negative or whatever.
Totally.
So the point is to not separate yourself from it and just find a way within yourself that you're okay with it and you're cool and you can actually live the word shy.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. And, specifically, I can relate to the shyness point and basically being in fear, like in reaction to that point. And that's kind of the common pattern with so many points, is that, something like as a particular emotion about it comes up within ourself where, like with sadness, anger, whatever, basically, where it's kind of it's there, here's the point, and we don't like the point that we're seeing within ourselves. And so it's like we create this coping experience with it where we want to get out of it but not totally like acknowledge it at the same time. And so going into like the reaction is in wanting to like act out that energy by doing by making our next movements like a new character play out on top of that initial character that came up, so to speak. And yeah, there's a lot of reflection within just like embracing the point. And like in the questions asked here, that shyness point could be revealing, like at times that maybe you are there's points behind the point. And I mean, so often when anything comes up as a reaction, that's in fact the case, that there is points behind the point. But it's not to say you now must do the opposite of it because there's points behind it. What I've found is that by allowing myself to slow down within the point that comes up within me, I'm able to in fact like understand the different dimensions of the point. And so then basically not be bothered by that, so to speak, and kind of ground the point within me, as opposed to like trying to like release it by just acting it out, being like quick to move as almost like a defense system, as like, oh fuck, like I'm going into this da 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 da. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's like everything just starts from that fear point.
totally.
That something exists outside of you that's after you or is going to do something bad to you or make something bad happen. And that's a part of like the biggest problems in this world. And it's why the world looks the way it does and why we're in that survival mode that you were talking about. It's that dog eat dog. We created it. That whole idea of separation, like being separate from everything and being afraid of whatever it is that's coming to get you.
Totally. And I mean, it's quite fascinating, when we look at it. Like, let's take this, the shyness character example, because, like, let's say, you're faced with the point, like, let's say, is your first time coming on to do, be a guest on the movie Hangout here, and you're going into this like shyness character experience, and you're holding yourself back from really talking, communicating. And if you take like a moment to breathe, look at it, you can see like, is this valid? Like, is this necessary for me here? Like, is this helping me? Like, am I doing this to like express myself? Like, like in a kind of like, this is just how I want to express myself, or is it more happening as as a suppression of the expression? Because like a shy point can be like, oh, like, I don't know, like acknowledging it and kind of playing within it, like as the specifics of the definition. But when it's the behavior, like the pattern is consequential into how you'd like to live yourself here. What I found to be helpful is just, and to look at it like with, let's say, being shy in the talking point here, it's, kind of slow down within it. Like, okay, I'm having difficulty to communicate myself here. Um, okay, perhaps I'm like nervous also, like I don't want to mess up what I'm going to say. I'm taking this very seriously, and, all these things, like wanting to be right. And what's interesting is that so often, like, let's say the shyness character here, in the the character manifestation you're presenting yourself as, basically you're blocking yourself from all the things that you in fact want to share and express as yourself. But it's because it's almost like taking yourself too seriously in the fear that there is about this, is like fearing to fail or like make a mistake, that you might say something and it might come out wrong. um, so very much these suppressions are linked to our self-trust and our willingness to just move ourselves. Because if you look at the point with communication and fear that, okay, I'm not going to be able to do it, I'm not going to be able to speak, is that you're given some time and space to speak. And if you say something and it's not what you meant to say, you have also the opportunity to say, oh, forgive me, let me take that back, or let me correct myself. And you can move on, kind of thing. And that's kind of the cool thing about allowing ourselves to open up and be specific with our words and identifying the points within ourselves, is that it really enhances our ability to communicate with each other, here in the moment, and to actually like learn how to express ourselves for real, as basically to just go, like, talk, choose our words very choice specific, if you will, as just like allow ourselves to flow and play with how we want to say. And it'd be like an enjoyable thing, as opposed to it being like a rush, like la, 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 like just gotta get it out so fast, and not really like enjoy the whole waltz of it, if you will. And yeah.
Yeah, that's the point again, is slowing yourself down so you can build that self-trust. So when you do say something, or you do say something and you get caught up in whatever is going on in your mind, you can see it and you can do something about it and you can change it. And that's how the self-trust is built.
Totally. And I think important thing to acknowledge about it as well is that some points are going to be easier to correct, like change, let's say, like in a moment, like it'd be just like, aha, okay. And you substantiated it pretty well, like pretty quickly. Some points, based on like your participation within them over time, will be more challenging. And it's allowing ourselves to acknowledge that at the same time, and to be okay with not sounding like, let's say, amazing, or basically our best, or how we think we have the potential to be so great within that point. Because like, let's take it to an extreme example or whatever. It's like you've never driven a car, but your whole life you've seen your parents drive a car, your friends drive a car, and you've talked to them about it. You understand, like, okay, the foot, the gas, the brake, the hands, the steering wheel. You get that they got to check this mirror, that mirror. You've read all about it, read the manual. taken some like theory about it, but you haven't put the points into like physical application. You're going to be a little rough around the edges that first time you're driving, and that experience may vary from person to person. Just like with point to point that we're implementing, like from a weakness to a strength, there's going to be like some roughness there to it, and that's part of like fine tuning it, smoothing out the ride as like the expression of ourselves.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, totally. And it's such a cool thing, like in allowing ourselves to be, honest, vulnerable about our points of weakness. I mean, this is really a huge aha moment, because in having this ability skill, and essentially this is a pretty straightforward ability skill, is just to acknowledge like what you suck at, like what you're not good at. And by that very recognition and regard, you're on your way to being better at it, because it's a matter of looking and acknowledging it, like standing within it. Because as soon as you take a look, you then like allow yourself, basically the capacity to look more. It's like again, let's say look at it as the instruction manual how to do something. Well, okay, you acknowledge you don't know how to do it, so now you've looked at the instruction manual. Well, now what comes up now is that you see that, okay, there's support here in looking at the instruction manual, and you can ask now questions and then refer back to the manual. And it's basically like we give ourselves away, so to speak. And there's so many ways to play with how we work. We practice on things like drills and exercises, if you will. And that's what's quite cool about things here, is that there's so many ways in which we can work on expanding like our character as our best potential here. And it's a matter of communication.
Yeah. Self-communication, too.
Totally.
For me, one of the biggest game changers in this process that we're in is realizing that we change and reprogram ourselves by being physical with it.
Right.
Like one of the examples for me is I work out every day, but every other day, every other few days, I do yoga. And when I first started yoga, I mean, I was falling all over the place. I couldn't keep my balance, but it's like a gradual change of being able to do more and stretch more and have more balance. And it's, if anyone, I strongly recommend doing physical exercise in that way, so you can see your potential. Because what you can do physically, you can also do with other parts of your life. If when you see that growth and that change, it becomes very clear that you can do it with everything else. The physical is going to show you just what you can do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's a great, like, physical activities. I mean, it can be as simple as walking, or like you said, doing yoga, but basically creating like the time and space where you're focused specifically like on a physical activity where you don't really have to think so much about it, but more just like allow yourself to move, go through those motions, and be in tune with like your body awareness, and basically pushing, moving those different body parts, so to speak. And I think what opens up from that is the regard and recognition that everything we do all the time is physical, that you can't get away from the physical, though it's arguable, you could say, and that's kind of like the mind fight resistance, is that, well, not everything's physical or whatever, because we've created like a sort of disconnect, and it even stems from like the way we regard our words, you know, like how we speak, like our thinking, that's, you know, not physical, that it's just sort of this like mental happening, that's there's a disconnect from it. And you know, it being like not regarded as so substantial kind of thing, like, oh, those are just words. Or you know, maybe, I mean, there's that saying, like I mentioned earlier as a kid, the whole like sticks and stones, you know, being like a physical thing, they can hurt you, but not the words so much so. But the words are like integrated within us physically. And, you know, it's our relationship with the individual words as these physical things inside us, like as the sounds that resonate. And, you know, they basically reveal to us the experience of ourself in different moments, and so much so it comes up as, you know, different emotions or feelings. And you know, we've been walking through the Destiny process is seeing just how polarized our vocabularies are, you know, basically like the law of our being here. And that, you know, our capacity to be like physical, expressive, like utmost potential creative beings, you know, has been suppressed throughout our lives to different extents because of the nature of our relationship with words, where it's like our capacity to, you know, just even do, let's say, like the exercises or like the points that we want to do, like let's say yoga or go running. We might, you know, think, okay, yeah, I want to do this, and you know, have like our positive like mindset about it. But then when it maybe gets time to do it, you experience like this heaviness or like lethargy within yourself, and it's kind of like, man, I really wanted to do it, but I'm just not feeling it now. And you know, then it's revealing to how our ability to like move in something is based on the energetic feeling experience, where it can be very revealing and showcasing that our actual like ability to move has not been so self-directed, but it's been the self-interest of our feeling as like the high to do, or like the emotional low to like not do, go there, which you know is quite a huge point into the overall like conditioning like of ourself as like human beings here in this world. Because you know, it really reflects why, you know, part of my frankness, that you know, the world is like, the collective world is such a mess, you know, like that there's so much abuse, suffering, that you know, so many people live in bad, you know, like very bad, awful living conditions. I mean, you know, we're talking here like as, you know, two humans that are like better off on the scale of like the whole collective point. And you know, it's just basically a random lottery to an extent in terms of like the environment that you got to come up with and your upbringing, and so thus like the type of behavior mechanisms you're exposed to, the survival skills you learned in order to like, you know, create the relationships with people in certain ways, so that you know, you could have like basically this, you know, luxury to be like, oh, like it's okay, like you know, at least I don't have it as bad as so many other people. And I mean, it's kind of ridiculous like how the setup is, but it's like, you know, the majority of people in this world are in the, you know, the middle, if you will, like the middle class kind of thing. And it's kind of like you have the extreme like wealth on one side, and you have, you know, the extreme shit. And I would say the middle like falls into the extreme shit, and it tails off into like the low end of the luxury scale kind of thing, where you know, the stressors are still very much connected into the middle point. Which is fascinating, because if we reflect on that, just on the whole polarity of points, and we regard that the majority of people here in this world are stuck in the middle somewhere, it showcases like how, you know, this is like the collective of people in the most fear in the world, and that's like the majority of the world is basically operating in serious realms of fear within the neutrality point, if you will, which ironically enough, in, you know, some like new agey type like positive thinking circles, the neutrality is regarded as like the ultimate Zen, like Buddhist, like you know, position and mantra and way of life, way of living, because it's when, you know, the negative or whatever comes up, and you're like, you know, basically just be neutral, don't get involved, don't take it, da da da. But it's not really showing you how to like reflect on those points within yourself. It's just kind of showing you how to like hold it there. And then the same with, you know, maybe the positive the other way, kind of like, you know, don't, you know, stay center. But it's not really, you're not really necessarily having the deconstruction of it, if you will, is like how to, you know, forgive and take regard for all the energies associated with the points. So, you know, you're stuck like holding yourself within the positive and the negative at the same time, being like pushed and pulled, you know, on all ways around. So, you know, the levels of stress in which you're under all the time is tremendous. And you know, ultimately that, you know, is a simple like explanation into why, or like the scope of the situation we have here in terms of like our capacity as like a collective body of people in this world, the majority, to, you know, take responsibility and do the work, because ultimately the majority, you know, is the vote, is the power. um, yeah, so it's interesting because it's basically like the common accepted sentiment, so much so, is you know, spitefulness, because we've gotten so accustomed to spiting ourselves. And you know, we, like you were mentioning earlier about the anger point, is that, oh well, you know, anger feels like powerful, so much so, and it's linked to these other like more, you know, obviously regarded as like weaknesses and suppressions, as like the inferiority, the inadequacy, all those things. But when you play it out in the anger, you feel like you are the superior, while all the while like you're not it like at all, but you're just acting it out to basically, you know, convince yourself of the lie you're living, so much so.
Yeah, totally. So much came up while you were talking.
Yeah, yeah, there was just like a number of points there. Just one that's kind of the funny thing with points and our ability to just like look at things, is that when we're open and willing to look at something with, you know, no filter about it, we're able to like see the potential as like basically the responsibility to see, you know, the whole way around on it. And when you can go the whole way around on a point you're willing to open up and look at, you see, you know, dimensions from this angle, that angle, like you know, like a spokes on a wheel kind of thing, like all these different ways in which it connects. And it's fascinating because what I've noticed when I take a point that I want to look at, you know, like initially, you know, it starts with like pick one word kind of thing, but it doesn't have to be just about integrating just the one word, because there's so many words that connect with that other one word and that relate and are like definite complementary supportive structures for integrating that one word. Like even if you just look in the dictionary, for instance, and you see, you know, you look up any word, there's going to be a number of synonyms, and those words are all closely related to it. So then if you go there from the synonyms, you see that each of those words has synonyms, and all those points have, you know, unique attributes about it, which thus makes, you know, your world, your ability to like open up and, you know, move within a point that much more expansive, because you're expanding your horizons, so to speak, as the words you're working with in your world.
Yeah, I totally agree on the expansion part and working with words and daily application and seeing how you can perfect those words that you're living and how you can use them to actually move yourself and guide yourself in a way that isn't self-interest. When you have those words, it's, you know, being directive principle, and again building that self-trust that, you know, I don't have to live in my self-interest. I can do what's best.
Or let me.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say something. Um, it just reminded of on the self-interest point. To be clear, like for anybody who's watching who's maybe not familiar with like how this word is being used, like self-interest. Like I know for myself, like to be like, what, like my self-interest, like how, why would I do anything that isn't my self-interest? Like the whole kicker is to regard that, you know, the way in which our self-interest has been so much so has not really been our true like best, if you will, because it's just been like moving in reaction to points, like moving away or towards them based on like the energy that we've, you know, programmed, conditioned ourselves into based on our environment and like the intake and all the stimuli, so to speak. And that essentially, you know, it's in regarding these points and basically deconstructing that whole self-interest as just being this like energetic push-pull, high-low equation is we really like expand our self-interest. So like our self-interest like opens up as, you know, a reflection of ourself here as everything, as like each is a reflection of everything here. You know, each stands in like the point of, you know, the universe, so to speak, and we're all here in the universe together, kind of thing. Like, you know, we're all made up of it, and we're standing as different expressions from moment to moment as it. And yeah, how I've come to regard the self-interest point is in like opening it up, so it's a matter of learning how to read effectively, and this reading is essentially like my ability to work with words here in my world, and that starts with like the words within myself, like to, you know, read the programs essentially as the words of how they exist within myself, because in doing that, you know, I can read everything else, because like we were talking about earlier, you know, in learning anything, it's a matter of, you know, reading the instructions, and so much so like the coding, the programming is very much individualized. You know, it's entirely self-induced as our word relations, the specifics, as, you know, this emotion might be connected to, you know, this word for you, and it'd be totally different for somebody else, and it's linked to, like we were talking earlier, the specifics like of the memories that are connected to those feelings and emotions, and how you imprinted that upon yourself. And so it's really a matter of like reading, you know, reading your life review, so to speak, because it's looking at your past to see how that's contributed to your acting in the present moment. And it's funny because it's like, oh, okay, really, like that's all everything is here, is basically like reading and then, you know, writing to an extent. And, you know, so much so that's the emphasis that we share within, you know, doing the Destiny I process, is there's like a big emphasis on our words and looking at our words and slowing down and forgiving ourselves on particular points. And I mean, maybe, you know, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but that goes into the basics of the tools here. And yeah, that's all I'll say about that for now.
Yeah, the self-forgiveness is a really cool way to sort through all the memories and all of the emotional attachments that you have to the memories, so that you can let go of those and move forward with your life and stop being held back by the characters
Right.
that you created, um, from that fear and the things that you do out of self-interest in order to maintain those characters. It stops.
That's
It's gone. And
that's
you can actually then move forward and actually be the director principal and not be controlled by what's going on or coming up in your mind or chasing after some sort of energetic experience.
that's such a such a great point there, Kerry. Because I mean, I've definitely, at times had the tendency where, okay, I'm gonna like look at this point or see this, look at this point, but then, I just looked at it and I didn't really go into forgiving myself for basically like the point and seeing how I acted or behaved or the emotion or the feeling I went into on it. I just kind of, looked at it and it's like, oh, okay, I see it, I got it. But then, I didn't give myself permission to, it's funny, didn't give myself permission to release myself from it. And so then, when the particulars of that kind of energetic dynamic would come about again, as it kind of goes full circle in a way, I then would, be quick in my mind to like act out that character play again. And, someone could then point it out and be like, yeah, I know, I know, I know. And that saying like, I know, quick kind of thing being, a defense mechanism in that, yeah, I do know of like this pattern behavior that I exist in that's a point of suppression to an extent. Um, but I've been reacting in fear to it because I didn't want to take it all the way and totally like slow down and really stand as like the owner of myself here, like as the king in asking like myself for forgiveness as really like the greatest gift I can give to myself as to like, release all the cells of my body from like being bound to this limited like vibrational state as that I would always resonate and be attuned to whenever, the specifics of a situation, like the music was a certain way kind of thing, like then I would be into that trance, like hypnosis, which is self-induced. And yeah, so anybody, especially who's, not so familiar with pushing the self-forgiveness, uh, I definitely implore you to like really push that for yourself because ultimately, that is like the ticket of so much here is in giving yourself permission to recreate yourself in a way that's better, learn from your mistakes effectively.
It's a self-agreement with yourself that you don't need that anymore, so you can let it go. All parts of you are in agreement. You don't need that anymore. You're ready to see what else is there for potential.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, okay, Carrie, any final thoughts? We've rocked on quite a long time here. I think
Yeah, we covered a lot.
yeah. All right then. Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in for another Hangout edition, movie Hangout. Always a pleasure to share with you here. And thanks for the question and the comment that came in. Again, you're always encouraged to share, even if it's not a question, you just want to make a comment about whatever. Feel free to do so. Then, if you happen to watch this and it's not live, the words are always welcome. So yeah, until next week. There was some talk that the movie next week would be the movie Funny People with Adam Sandler and Seth Rogen, and there's some other names maybe in it as well. Kind of a funny movie, kind of a serious movie. Uh, Anywho, if you'd like to participate in that, uh, find me on Facebook, give me a message, or message in the Destiny I Process Lite group. Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Carrie.
Pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone.